Chapter 1. The phone that ate Saturday. Maxwell Turley didn't go looking for problems. He wasn't built that way. Problems, in his experience, tended to announce themselves eventually, usually when people were too busy pretending everything was fine to notice the cracks forming underneath. Saturday afternoon at Sierra's parents' house didn't feel like a place where cracks belonged. The backyard was loud with conversation, the kind of easy, overlapping chatter that came from people who had known each other long enough not to need turns. There was the sharp scent of charcoal drifting from the grill, her mother laughing too loudly at something someone had said, and Sierra, smiling, relaxed, exactly where she was supposed to be. If someone had asked Max 10 minutes earlier how things were, he would have said, "Good, really good." Then her father asked him to help in the garage. "Just need a hand with something quick," he said, already walking, not really leaving room for no. Max followed, wiping his hands on his jeans out of habit more than necessity. He didn't mind helping. He actually liked Sierra's dad. The man was straightforward, calm, not the type to circle around a point when he could just land on it. The garage smelled like oil and old wood. Sierra's father shut the door halfway, muting the backyard noise into a distant hum. "Grab that box," he said, pointing vaguely to something that didn't actually need two people. Max picked it up anyway. They moved it 3 feet. "Appreciate it," her father said, brushing his hands together. Then he leaned against the workbench, arms crossing in a way that felt less about comfort and more about settling in. Max smiled faintly. "That all you needed?" Her father held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. "Actually, since we're out here," there it was. Max didn't sigh, didn't roll his eyes. This was part of it. Always had been. Fathers asked questions. It wasn't unreasonable. "Where do you see things going with Sierra?" "Direct. No decorations." Max shifted his weight, not because he was uncomfortable, but because he took the question seriously. "Forward," he said. "We've talked about getting a bigger place. Maybe a house at some point." Her father nodded, but he didn't look satisfied. "You sound certain." "I am." Another pause. Max could see the next question forming before it came. "Then what's holding you back?" That one sat heavier. Max didn't answer immediately, which wasn't like him. He usually knew where he stood on things. That was half the reason his life worked the way it did. But this felt different. "It's not a big thing," Max said finally. Her father raised an eyebrow. "Those usually are." Max huffed a quiet laugh. "Yeah, I know." He glanced toward the half-open garage door, where a slice of sunlight cut across the floor. He could hear Sierra's voice outside, animated and warm. "She's consistent," Max said. "She respects me. She's never given me a reason not to trust her." "Sounds like you're describing a wife," her father replied. Max nodded once. "That's the direction." "Then what's the issue?" Max hesitated, not because he didn't want to answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real in a way it hadn't needed to be before. "It's her phone," he said. The words hung there, smaller than the weight behind them. Her father blinked. "Her phone." "Yeah, that's it." Max shrugged lightly. "It doesn't sound like much." "I get that." Her father studied him for a moment. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about stuff like this." "Explain." Max rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the simplest way to put something that felt oddly complicated. "It's like," he started, then paused. "It's like living with someone who's there physically, but their attention is everywhere else. Conversations stop halfway. You say something, and she laughs 3 seconds later because she caught the end of it." Her father didn't respond right away. Max continued, calmer now that he'd started. "It's not disrespect. Not intentionally. She just doesn't realize how much time it takes from us." Her father frowned slightly. "I don't see that." Max nodded. "I figured you wouldn't." He let the silence settle for a beat before pushing off the workbench. "I can show you," he said. Her father's expression shifted to skepticism, curiosity threading into it. "All right." Max pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. "Come to the garage for a second." "Fastest way to get her attention," he said. They waited. Took a couple of minutes. Sierra opened the garage door with an easy smile, her presence filling the space like it always did. "Why are you two hiding out here?" she asked, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "Man talk," her father said. She groaned playfully. "Oh great. Should I be worried?" "Always," Max said, smiling. She walked over, her eyes flicking between them. "What's up?" "I was telling your dad about us looking into a bigger place," Max said casually. Her expression lit up. "Yeah? You're finally admitting that out loud." "Apparently," he replied. Her father nodded approvingly. "Sounds like a solid plan." "I knew you'd like him," Sierra said, nudging Max's arm. "Is that all you needed?" she asked. "Yeah," Max said. She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and turned to leave. Her phone never left her hand. The garage door closed behind her. Max didn't say anything immediately. He just looked at her father. "Did you notice?" he asked. Her father crossed his arms. "That's thin, Max." Max nodded slowly. "Okay." He tapped his phone again. It rang twice before Sierra picked up. "We need to stop meeting like this," she said through the speaker, her voice light and amused. People will talk. Max suppressed a smile. Sorry. You forgot your phone out here. Oh, she said. Okay, thanks. The call ended. Silence returned. Her father's eyebrow lifted slightly, but he didn't comment. Wait for it, Max said. 34 seconds later, the garage door opened again. Sierra stepped in, still holding her phone, scanning the space. Where did I put it? She asked, already looking in the wrong places. Her father pointed slowly, directly at her hand. She followed the gesture, looked down, and blinked. Oh, she said. Then she laughed, a bright, unbothered sound, and shook her head. Wow. She walked out again, still smiling. The door closed. Her father stared at the empty space for a long second before looking back at Max. Believe me now? Max asked. Her father nodded once, slow and certain. Yeah, he said quietly. Chapter 2. Ghost in the room. Max didn't bring it up on the drive home. He could have. The silence between them wasn't heavy. Not the kind that demanded to be filled, but it wasn't entirely empty either. Sierra scrolled through something on her phone, thumb moving, expression shifting in quick flickers of amusement, while Max drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely against his leg. Everything looked normal. That was the problem. You're suspiciously quiet, Sierra said, glancing up just long enough to say it before her eyes dropped back to her screen. Max smirked faintly. I talk all the time. Thought I'd give the world a break. Very selfless of you, she said, tapping something, then laughing softly. He waited, expecting her to tell him what was funny. She didn't. He didn't ask. The moment passed without either of them acknowledging it. Like a skipped beat neither wanted to admit they felt. By the time they got back to his apartment. No, their apartment now, even if neither of them said it that way out loud. The rhythm had settled back into something familiar. Comfortable. Easy. Or at least it used to feel that way. Sierra dropped her bag on the kitchen counter and kicked off her shoes without looking up, still engaged with whatever had her attention. Max grabbed 2 bottles of water from the fridge and slid one toward her. Hydration is important, he said. She caught it one-handed without looking, muscle memory doing the work for her. You're right. I should hydrate more. She didn't open it. Max leaned against the counter across from her, watching for a second longer than usual. Sierra. Her attention didn't lift. You thirsty, or are you just emotionally committed to holding that bottle? That got a smile. A real one directed at him. She glanced up. Both, probably. Strong strategy. She twisted the cap open, took a sip, then set it down. Phone already reclaiming her focus, like gravity snapping something back into orbit. Max pushed off the counter. I'm gonna shower. Okay, she said lightly. No follow-up. No look. Not unusual. He stood there for half a second longer, not expecting anything different, then nodded to himself and walked toward the bedroom. He wasn't irritated. Not exactly. If anything, he felt observant. It was a strange state for him. Max liked clarity. Problems were usually simple once you define them properly. You either addressed them or you didn't. Letting something sit in the middle, that vague, undefined space, wasn't his style. But this wasn't something you could fix with one conversation or one decision. Not yet. He stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind him, and let the quiet settle around him. For the first time in a while, the silence felt more present than the person just in the other room. Dinner was simple. Stir-fry, thrown together with the kind of efficiency that came from repetition. Max handled the pan, Sierra handled. Well, technically she was supposed to be handling the vegetables. In practice, she was standing beside him, phone angled slightly away like she thought it made it less obvious. What do you think about broccoli? She asked absently. In general? In this. I think it's already in the pan, Max said, tossing it lightly. Oh, she said, finally looking up. Right? He glanced at her, not annoyed, just noting it. You all right? She asked, catching his look this time. Yeah, he said easily. Why wouldn't I be? You just did that thing. What thing? That look. Max blinked. I have a look now? You've always had a look, she said, setting her phone down for the first time in minutes. Don't act like you don't know. He smiled faintly. Enlighten me. It's like. She tilted her head, studying him. You're not mad. You're just observing. Like you're filing something away for later. Max chuckled under his breath. That's very specific. I've known you for 2 years, she said simply. I pay attention. That landed a little heavier than she intended. Max nodded once. Fair enough. She watched him for a moment longer, like she was considering asking something else. Then her phone buzzed. The moment broke. She picked it up instinctively. Max turned back to the stove, giving her the space she didn't even realize she was taking. They ate on the couch. They always had, even though there was a perfectly good table 5 feet away. It was one of those habits that didn't need fixing because it worked. Or at least it used to. Max balanced his plate on his knee, eating without rush. Sierra sat beside him, angled slightly toward him, but her attention wasn't. Did you hear what I said? She asked suddenly. Max looked at her. You said your coworker dropped her lunch in the parking lot. Oh, Sierra said, blinking. Okay, good. You told me that 5 minutes ago. She laughed. Did I? Wow. Efficiency. You're maximizing repetition. She nudged him with her shoulder. Shut up. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes the way it usually did. A few seconds passed. Sierra. Yeah. What's your plan tonight? She shrugged lightly. I don't know. Probably just relax. Why? No reason, he said. Just wondering if we were doing something together or separately. She frowned slightly, looking at him more directly now. We live together, Max. We're always together. He considered that. Not always, he said quietly. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked between him and her phone like she was trying to reconcile something she didn't fully understand. What does that mean? She asked. Max took another bite, buying himself a second to decide how much he wanted to say. It means, he said finally, sometimes it feels like I'm hanging out with a version of you that's only partially here. She opened her mouth, then stopped. That's not fair, she said, but there wasn't much weight behind it. I didn't say you were doing it on purpose. That doesn't make it better. It's not supposed to, he replied evenly. Silence stretched between them, thinner than before, but sharper. Sierra set her plate aside, the phone still in her other hand. I'm here, she said. I know. I'm sitting right next to you. I see that. Her frustration flickered. Then what are you saying? Max turned slightly toward her. Calm. Steady. I'm saying presence isn't just physical. She stared at him, processing. He didn't push further. Not yet. The point wasn't to win an argument. There wasn't even an argument to win. There was just something off. And for the first time in over 2 years, Max wasn't content to let it sit there unexamined. Sierra looked down at her phone again, almost reflexively, then hesitated. Slowly, she placed it face down on the coffee table. It was a small thing, but Max noticed. They sat there for a while after that, neither of them rushing to fill the silence. The TV played something neither of them was watching. And for a few rare minutes, Sierra's attention stayed exactly where it was supposed to be. With him, it should have felt like relief. Instead, Max found himself wondering how long it would last. Chapter 3. The checklist. Max liked clarity. It was one of the few things he considered non-negotiable. Not in relationships, not in work, not in anything that required his time. If something mattered, it needed to make sense. If it didn't make sense, it needed to be addressed until it did. That was how he operated. That was how things stayed simple. So Sunday morning, while Sierra was still asleep, curled on her side, her phone inexplicably resting on the pillow beside her like it had earned its own space, Max sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee and mentally ran through what he'd always called the checklist. He didn't write it down. Never needed to. It lived in his head, precise and organized without effort. Respect, loyalty, consistency. Those were the big ones. Everything else branched off of them. Respect, solid. Sierra had never crossed that line. Even when they disagreed, she didn't take cheap shots. Didn't aim to hurt. Loyalty, untouched. She had never once given him a reason to question where he stood with her or where she stood with him. Consistency. Max took a slow sip of his coffee. That was where things got interesting, because technically she was still consistent. She still showed up, still laughed, still cared, still fit into his life in all the ways that mattered. But something underneath that consistency had shifted. Not enough to break anything, but enough to make him notice. Consistency used to mean presence. Now it felt like availability, which wasn't quite the same thing. Max leaned back slightly in his chair, exhaling through his nose. So what is it, really? He muttered to himself. She's possessed, Sierra said from behind him. Max glanced over his shoulder. She stood in the doorway, arms loosely crossed, hair slightly messy, still wearing yesterday's oversized hoodie. She looked equal parts amused and suspicious. And here I thought I was having a private conversation, Max said. You were, she replied, walking toward the fridge. You were just losing it quietly. Debatable. She grabbed orange juice, poured herself a glass, and leaned against the counter across from him. What were you talking about? She asked, watching him over the rim of the glass. Nothing important. That's a lie, she said immediately. That's an assumption. You don't talk to yourself about unimportant things, she countered. You ignore unimportant things. Max smiled faintly. You do pay attention. When I'm here, she said. There it was again. She didn't seem to notice how those words landed. Max set his coffee down. I was just thinking. About. Us. She raised an eyebrow but didn't look alarmed. That sounds serious for 9 a.m. It's not, he said. It's maintenance. Maintenance. Yeah. Making sure everything's working the way it's supposed to. She took another sip of her drink, considering that. And? Are we breaking down? Max shook his head. No. We're still running fine. That doesn't sound reassuring. It's not supposed to be dramatic, he said. We're good, Sierra. I'm just noticing things. She lowered the glass slightly. Things like what? Max didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up, stretching briefly before walking over to where she was. You remember when you asked me what my boundaries were? He said. Of course. And I told you I care about actions more than labels. She nodded slowly. Yeah. This is one of those situations where it's not about what something is called, Max said. It's about what it does. Sierra frowned slightly. You're being cryptic on purpose. I'm being precise. That's worse. Max chuckled. Fair. He leaned against the counter beside her, not facing her directly but not avoiding her either. Your phone, he said simply. She exhaled, more annoyed than surprised. We're still on that? We're not still on it, Max corrected calmly. We just got to it. She looked at him fully now. Max, I told you I'm here. I don't know what you want me to do. Stare at you all day. That's not what I asked for. Then what are you asking for? Attention that isn't split all the time, he said evenly. It's not all the time. Max tilted his head slightly. You sure about that? She opened her mouth to respond, then hesitated just enough to acknowledge the truth before pushing past it. I have friends, she said. I have things going on. I'm allowed to talk to people. I never said you weren't. You're acting like I'm doing something wrong. I'm saying something feels off, Max replied. There's a difference. Sierra set her glass down a little harder than necessary. It feels like you're nitpicking. That's not my style, he said simply. No, your style is. She gestured vaguely. This, acting calm while you dissect everything. Max laughed under his breath. That's a colorful way to put it. Am I wrong? He met her gaze, steady and unbothered. You're not wrong, but I'm not doing it to pick you apart. I'm doing it because I care about what we're building. Her expression softened slightly, but the tension didn't disappear. It's just a phone, Max. No, he said quietly. It's not. Then what is it? It's time, he answered. It's attention. It's presence. Those aren't small things. She shook her head. You're making it bigger than it is. And I think you're making it smaller than it is. They stood there, the distance between them not physical, but noticeable. Sierra ran a hand through her hair, exhaling. Okay, so what, you want me to just put it away all the time? No. Then what do you want? Max didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, he didn't want to control her behavior. That had never been his approach. If something needed to be forced, it wasn't real. I want balance, he said finally. I want to feel like I'm not competing with something you don't even realize you're prioritizing. I'm not prioritizing my phone over you. Max gave her a look, not accusing, just honest. Then it shouldn't be hard to prove, he said. That hit a nerve. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So this is a test now? No, he said calmly. It's an observation. That sounds like a test. Only if you're trying to pass something, Max said. She let out a frustrated breath. You're impossible. I'm consistent, he corrected. That's not always a good thing. It is when you know what you're getting, he replied. They held eye contact for a moment longer, neither of them backing down, but neither escalating either. That was their dynamic. No explosions, no shouting, just steady pressure. Sierra finally looked away first, grabbing her glass again even though she didn't drink from it. So what? You've been sitting here making a list of everything I do wrong, she asked, quieter now. Max shook his head immediately. No. Then what is this? This is me noticing one thing that matters, he said, and not ignoring it. She shifted her weight, the fight draining slightly into something closer to uncertainty. I didn't realize it bothered you this much, she admitted. I didn't realize it either, Max said. Not until it did. That seemed to land. Silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't as sharp. It was thoughtful. Sierra glanced down at her phone, which sat untouched on the counter now. For once, she didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked back at him. Okay, she said slowly. So what does balance look like to you? Max considered the question, then gave a small, almost approving nod. That, he said, is a good place to start. He wasn't expecting immediate change. He didn't need perfection. But for the first time since the thought had formed, the problem wasn't just sitting in his head anymore. It was out in the open. And that meant it could actually be solved. Chapter 4, Terms and Conditions. Max didn't bring it up again that day. Not because it was resolved, he didn't think it was, but because he didn't believe in hammering a point until it lost its meaning. He'd said what he needed to say. Sierra had heard him. That was enough for now. Change, if it was real, would show up in actions. He wasn't interested in promises. Sunday unfolded quietly. They did laundry together, folding clothes on the bed in uneven piles while a movie played in the background neither of them was fully watching. Sierra made a visible effort. He noticed that right away. Her phone stayed within reach, but she didn't grab it every time it buzzed. Not every time, but enough for Max to see how embedded the habit really was. At one point, she caught herself mid-reach and stopped, her fingers hovering an inch above the screen. She withdrew her hand slowly, like she was breaking some invisible pull. Max didn't comment. He just saw it. that mattered more. By Monday evening, the pattern hadn't dramatically improved, but it had shifted just enough to be noticeable. Sierra was trying, and she didn't try halfway. That was one of the reasons Max had always trusted her. If she committed to something, she put effort behind it. But habits weren't like decisions. You couldn't just decide them away. Max sat on the couch, flipping through something on the TV. When Sierra walked in from the bedroom, she went straight to the coffee table, picked up her phone, paused, and then set it back down again. "Okay," she said almost to herself. Max glanced over. "You negotiating with it now?" She gave him a look. "It's harder than it should be." "I don't doubt that." She crossed her arms, studying the phone like it might do something unpredictable. "I didn't realize how automatic it was." "That's usually how it works," Max said. "Habits don't ask permission." She exhaled, then dropped onto the couch beside him. "So what now?" "What now what? What does balance actually look like in real life?" she said, turning toward him. "Not theory, not some vague idea. What do you want this to be?" Max muted the TV, giving her his full attention. "I don't want to control how you use your time," he said. "That's not my role." "I know, but I do expect that when we're spending time together, we're actually spending time together." She tilted her head slightly. "Define that." "Conversations that don't keep pausing," he said. "Moments that don't get interrupted every couple of minutes. You're not feeling like you have to check something just because it made a sound." "That sounds reasonable," she said. "It is reasonable," he agreed. She picked at a thread on her sleeve. "So like, phone-free time?" Max nodded once. "That's one way to do it." "How much?" "I'm not putting a timer on it," he said. "This isn't a punishment." "I know," she said quickly. "I just want something clear." Max leaned back slightly, thinking. "Start simple," he said. "Dinner. An hour after. No phone unless it's something important." Sierra nodded slowly. "Okay. And not just leaving it face down next to you," he added. She glanced at him. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything, Sierra." She let out a soft laugh. "That's mildly intimidating." "It's only a problem if you're trying to hide something," he said lightly. "I'm not hiding anything," she replied. "I know. That wasn't the issue." Sierra leaned back beside him, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "All right, dinner and an hour after. No phone." Max gave a small nod. "That's a good start." She glanced at him again, more thoughtful now. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Max didn't answer immediately. He clasped his hands loosely in front of him, considering how to put something that didn't sound like blame, because it wasn't. "I was waiting to see if it was temporary," he said. "People go through phases. I didn't want to make something bigger than it needed to be." "And when did it stop feeling like a phase?" "Recently," he said. "What changed?" Max looked at her directly. "I started feeling like I was sharing space with you instead of spending time with you." The words were calm, but they landed heavy. Sierra looked down, absorbing that. "That's not how I want you to feel," she said quietly. "I know. Then why didn't you tell me as soon as you felt it?" Max gave a small shrug. "I don't react to every feeling immediately. I want to understand it first." "So you were just observing me this whole time?" she asked, a hint of discomfort creeping in. "I was paying attention," he corrected. "That sounds worse." "It shouldn't," Max said. "Paying attention is how I protect what matters." She studied him, something softening in her expression again. "You're hard to argue with when you say things like that," she admitted. "That's because I'm not arguing," he said. She laughed lightly. "That's not fair either." Max smiled faintly. "Life's tough." Sierra nudged him with her shoulder, then sat there in quiet for a moment, thinking. "Okay," she said eventually. "So we try this. Phone-free dinner. Then an hour." "Yeah. And if I mess up?" Max glanced at her. "You will." She made a face. "Thanks for the confidence." "I'm serious," he said. "You're not going to flip a switch and just be different overnight. That's not how this works." "So what happens when I do?" she pressed. Max shrugged lightly. "You notice it. You adjust. That's it. No lectures." "I already did the lecture part," he said. "I'm not interested in repeating myself." She studied him again, like she was searching for something deeper behind his words. "You're really not mad," she said finally. Max shook his head. "I'm not." "Then what are you?" He considered that. "Invested," he said. That answer seemed to reach her in a way nothing else had yet. Sierra let out a slow breath, then leaned back into the couch, her head resting lightly against the cushion. "Okay," she said, softer now. "I can work with invested." Max nodded once, satisfied with that. The TV stayed muted. Neither of them rushed to turn it back on. For a while, they just sat there. No distractions, no background noise, just quiet conversation that didn't need to compete with anything else. Felt familiar. Not new. Just returned. Sierra glanced at her phone once during that time. She didn't pick it up. Max noticed that too. But what mattered more wasn't the effort. It was the intention behind it. because for the first time, this wasn't just something he saw as a problem. It was something they were both choosing to fix, and that made all the difference. Chapter 5. Withdrawal symptoms. By Tuesday, Sierra hated her phone. Not in a dramatic, throw-it-across-the-room kind of way. It was quieter than that. More persistent. Like an itch she couldn't quite scratch, even when she knew exactly where it was. The rule had sounded simple when they made it. Dinner, then an hour after, no phone. An hour. 60 minutes. It shouldn't have felt like a challenge. And yet, at 7:12 p.m., she found herself sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a glass of water she didn't actually want, staring at her phone sitting across the room on the counter like it was personally daring her to come get it. Max noticed. Of course he did. He didn't say anything at first. He was leaning back in his chair, finishing his food at an unhurried pace, watching her with that same calm, steady expression he always had when he was paying attention. "You're glaring at it," he said finally. "I'm not glaring," Sierra replied quickly. "You are," he said. "If that phone could feel things, it would be uncomfortable right now." She exhaled sharply, dropping her gaze to the table. "It just feels weird." "Weird how?" "I don't know," she said. "Like I'm missing something." Max tilted his head slightly. "Like something important?" She hesitated. "No," she admitted. "Not important. Just something." "Yeah," he said simply. "That's the point." She looked at him, mildly annoyed. "You don't have to sound so satisfied about it." "I'm not satisfied," Max said. "I'm observing." "That's worse," she muttered. Max smiled faintly but didn't push. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. The quiet wasn't tense exactly, it just wasn't easy. Sierra shifted in her chair. Then again. Then she picked up her glass, took a sip, set it back down. 20 seconds later, she reached for it again. Max watched the pattern without comment. Finally, she huffed out a frustrated breath. "Okay, this is ridiculous." "What is?" "I feel like I don't know what to do with my hands." Max glanced down at them. "They seem functional." She shot him a look. "You know what I mean." "I do," he admitted. "And you're just going to sit there and let me suffer?" "You're not suffering," he said calmly. "You're adjusting. It feels like suffering. That's because you're aware of it now." Sierra leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're very unhelpful." "I'm extremely helpful," Max corrected. "I just don't interfere with the process." She stared at him for a second, then shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her mouth. "You say that like you've done this before." "I've broken habits before," he said. "They're all the same." "How?" "You replace them," he said simply. "With what?" Max gestured vaguely between them. "Conversation. Activities. Anything that doesn't involve you staring at a screen." She glanced at the empty dinner plates. "We're done eating. Now what?" Max stood, grabbing both plates. "Now we exist." "Wow. Inspiring," she said dryly. He smirked as he carried the dishes to the sink. "I try." Sierra stayed at the table for a second, then pushed her chair back and followed him into the kitchen. "Okay," she said, leaning against the counter. "Teach me how to exist." Max turned on the faucet, rinsing the plates. "You've been doing it your whole life." "Not recently," she shot back. He glanced at her over his shoulder. "Fair point." She picked up a dish towel, drying the plate he handed her. The simple, repetitive motion gave her something to do, something that didn't involve her phone, and she felt some of that restless energy settle just a little. "This is weirdly calming," she admitted. Yeah. See," Max said. "You're already adapting." "Don't get ahead of yourself," she said. But there was no bite in it. They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a few minutes. It wasn't rushed, wasn't distracted. Just a small, shared rhythm that didn't need anything else to fill it. When they finished, Sierra leaned back against the counter again, glancing briefly toward the living room where her phone sat untouched. "How much time is left?" she asked. Max checked the clock. 23 minutes. She groaned. "That's forever." "It's not even half an episode of anything," he said. "That's different." "Is it?" "Yes," she said immediately, then paused. "Actually, I don't know." Max chuckled under his breath. "You're negotiating with time now." "I'm just saying," she went on. "This would be easier if I knew I wasn't missing anything." "Like what?" "I don't know. Messages. Updates. Whatever." Max studied her for a moment. "Has anything you've checked in the last week been urgent enough that it couldn't wait an hour?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "No," she admitted. "Then you're not missing anything," he said. She frowned slightly, looking toward the living room again. "It doesn't feel that way." "Feelings and reality don't always match," Max replied. "That's why I go with patterns." She looked back at him. "And the pattern says?" "That you check it out of habit, not necessity," he said. Sierra exhaled slowly, absorbing that. "Okay," she said after a moment. "Then we need a distraction." "We don't need one," Max said. "I do." He looked amused. "All right, what kind?" She thought for a second, then snapped her fingers. Tell me something. Something? He echoed. Yeah, anything. A story, a memory, something random. Just talk. Max considered her for a moment, then shrugged lightly. When I was 16, I thought I was going to marry a girl I barely knew. Sierra blinked. We're starting strong, huh? You asked for something, he said. I did, she admitted, intrigued now. What happened? Max leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. She broke up with me 2 months later. Ouch. Yeah, he said, unfazed. I thought it was the end of the world. And now I realize she was a lesson, he said simply. Sierra tilted her head. Your grandmother's rule. Max nodded. Exactly. Friends, lovers, or lessons, she recited. Right? She studied him for a second. And what am I? Max didn't hesitate. You're not a lesson. Her expression softened, but curiosity lingered. Then what am I? Max held her gaze, steady and certain. You're someone I'm building something with, he said. The words weren't dramatic. He didn't deliver them like a declaration. He just said them like they were true, because to him they were. Sierra felt something shift at that, something quieter than excitement but deeper than simple reassurance. Okay, she said softly. They stood there for a moment, neither of them rushing to say anything else. Then, almost unconsciously, Sierra glanced toward the living room again. Max caught it. She noticed him noticing. Don't, he said lightly. I didn't do anything, she protested. You were about to. She sighed, dropping her head back against the cabinet behind her. This is hard. I know. How long does it take to stop feeling like this? Max shook his head. Different for everyone. That's not helpful. It's honest. She looked at him again, something in her expression shifting from frustration to determination. Okay, she said. Then I'm sticking with it. Max nodded once. I figured you would. She straightened slightly, pushing away from the counter. How much time now? Max checked the clock again. 3 minutes. Her eyes widened slightly. That's it. That's it. Sierra stared at him, then let out a short, surprised laugh. That went faster than I thought. Max smiled faintly. It usually does when you're actually present. She looked at him for a second, then nodded. Okay, she said again, softer this time. The timer, unofficial, unspoken, ended. Sierra walked into the living room, picking up her phone. She didn't unlock it right away. Instead, she turned it over in her hand, considering it in a way she never had before. Then she looked back at Max. I think I get it, she said. Max leaned lightly against the doorway. Yeah. She nodded slowly. Yeah. She still unlocked the phone, still checked it. But this time it wasn't automatic. And for the first time, that difference mattered more than the action itself. Chapter 6. The relapse dinner. Friday came with a little more weight than usual. Max noticed it before Sierra said anything, which wasn't surprising. She had a way of carrying tension in small, almost invisible ways. Slightly quieter movements, a longer pause before responding. Her eyes drifting not to her phone this time, but somewhere inward instead. What's going on? He asked as he buttoned his shirt, glancing at her from the mirror. Sierra sat on the edge of the bed, one foot tucked under her, absently rolling the hem of her sleeve between her fingers. Dinner at my parents', she said. Max adjusted his collar. That's not new. No, she agreed. But it feels different. Because of last weekend? She nodded. That made sense. Her father didn't strike Max as the type to forget something once he'd seen it. And Sierra, whether she admitted it out loud or not, knew exactly what Max had shown him. You think he's going to say something? Max asked. I don't know, she said. That's almost worse. Max turned to face her fully. Then don't make it about that. She looked up. What do you mean? I mean, don't go in there trying to prove anything, he said. Just be present. Sierra gave a small, humorless laugh. That's literally what this is about. Exactly, Max said. So don't overthink it. She blew out a slow breath, then pushed herself off the bed. You make everything sound simple. It usually is. Not this, she replied quietly. Max didn't argue. He just watched her for a second, then stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on her arm. You've been doing better, he said. You don't need to be perfect. Sierra held his gaze, something steadier replacing the uncertainty. Okay, he echoed. Dinner started the way it always did, warm, familiar, comfortably loud. Her mom hugged them both a second too long. Her dad shook Max's hand with that same firm grip, and within minutes they were seated at the table. Plates filling, conversation overlapping with easy familiarity. For a while, everything felt normal. Sierra laughed at something her mom said. She asked her dad about a project he'd been working on. She stayed engaged, her attention where it belonged. Max noticed, and more importantly, so did her father. There was a subtle shift in the older man's posture. Less guarded, more relaxed. He wasn't watching her the way he had last weekend. At least not at first. Halfway through dinner, Sierra's phone buzzed. It was quiet, but in the lull between conversations, It might as well have been a siren. Sierra froze just slightly. Max didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He could feel the hesitation beside him like a shift in air pressure. Her phone buzzed again. And this time, almost instinctively, she picked it up. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even conscious in the way she'd been trying to be all week. It was automatic. Her eyes dropped to the screen. Her thumb moved. Max set his fork down. Not loudly. Not pointedly. Just deliberately. Across the table, her father's conversation trailed off mid-sentence. Sierra didn't notice at first. She was reading something, her expression shifting into a quick smile, fingers tapping out a response before she even seemed to register what she was doing. Her mom glanced at her, then at Max. The silence stretched just long enough to be noticeable. "Sierra," her dad said. She hummed absent-mindedly, still looking at her phone. "Sierra." This time, there was enough weight in his voice to pull her attention up. "What?" she asked, blinking. The moment hit her all at once. The quiet, the looks, the awareness. Her gaze flicked to Max. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking anywhere in particular, just sitting there, composed, unreadable in that way he didn't use often. But she could feel it. Not anger. Disappointment. Worse. "Oh," she said softly, setting her phone down a little too quickly. "Sorry." Her father leaned back slightly in his chair, arms crossing loosely. "We were talking." "I know," Sierra said. "I'm sorry, You just what?" he asked. Not harsh, but not letting it slide either. Sierra hesitated, searching for an answer that didn't sound as weak as it felt. "I didn't think," she admitted. Max let out a quiet breath through his nose. That, at least, was honest. Her mom tried to soften the moment. "It happens. We all get distracted." Her father didn't disagree, but he didn't let it go either. "You've been on that thing a lot tonight," he said, his tone more observation than accusation. "I haven't," Sierra said automatically, then stopped, because that wasn't true. Not completely. Not anymore. She glanced at Max again, then back at her father. "More than I should be," she corrected. Her father nodded once. "That's better." The table fell into a quieter rhythm after that. Conversation resumed, but it wasn't as easy, not as fluid as before. And Sierra didn't touch her phone again. The drive home was different from the last one. This time, there was no comfortable silence. There was just silence. Max drove, one hand on the wheel, the streetlights passing in steady intervals across the windshield. Sierra sat angled slightly toward the window, her phone resting untouched in her lap. She didn't unlock it, didn't look at it, didn't even reach for it. "I messed up," she said finally. Max didn't look at her. Yeah. There was no softness in it, no cushioning, just agreement. Sierra swallowed, feeling it land heavier than she expected. "I wasn't even thinking," she said. "I know. That's worse." "It is," Max said calmly. She turned toward him slightly. "You're not even mad." Max glanced at her then, briefly. "No. Why not?" "Because being mad doesn't fix anything," he said. "It just wastes time." She shook her head, frustrated. "You're so controlled about this." "I'm not controlled," he replied. "I'm clear." "Clear about what?" He exhaled slowly, his grip on the wheel steady. "That this is exactly what I was talking about." Sierra looked down at her hands. "I've been trying." "I know you have. Then why does it feel like I just failed something big?" Max was quiet for a second before answering. "Because it matters," he said. That hit harder than anything else he could have said. Sierra leaned her head back against the seat, staring up at the ceiling of the car. "I hate that I didn't even notice it happening," she admitted. "It just happened." "Habits don't ask," Max said. "They just take." She let out a slow breath. "My dad noticed." "Yeah. And you didn't even have to say anything this time." Max shook his head slightly. "Didn't need to." The implication was clear. This wasn't something only he saw anymore. It wasn't something she could dismiss as his perspective. It was real. And it was visible. They drove the rest of the way in silence again, but it felt different now, less avoidance, more processing. When they got home, Sierra didn't go to the couch, didn't turn on the TV, didn't pick up her phone. Instead, she stood in the middle of the living room, looking at it sitting on the coffee table. Max set his keys down, watching her. "This isn't just a habit," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. She crossed her arms, her expression tightening with something more focused than frustration. "It's a problem." Max didn't respond right away. He just nodded once, because now, she finally saw it the same way he did. Chapter 7. Airplane mode. Saturday morning arrived without an alarm. Max woke first, not because he had to, but because he always did. It was part of his rhythm. Steady, predictable, the kind of consistency that didn't need effort anymore. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting his thoughts settle before the day started asking things of him. Beside him, Sierra was awake. He knew before he looked, not because she moved, or made noise, or reached for anything. Because she didn't. That was new. Max turned his head slightly. Sierra was lying on her back, staring up at nothing in particular, her hands resting on her stomach. No phone in sight, no glow, no small flickers of attention pulling her away, just stillness. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, her voice quieter than usual but clear. Max studied her for a second. "You look like you're thinking hard." "I am." "Good thoughts or dangerous ones?" "Both," she admitted. Max pushed himself up slightly, resting back against the headboard. "All right, let's hear it." Sierra turned her head to face him, her expression more focused than he'd seen all week. "I want to try something," she said. "I'm listening." She took a small breath, like she was about to say something bigger than it sounded. "I want to turn my phone off today." Max didn't react immediately, not because it was shocking, but because he could tell this wasn't impulsive. "That's not small," he said. "I know. That's not an adjustment. That's a full reset." "I know," she repeated. Max tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Sierra sat up, pulling her legs in loosely, facing him now. "Because I don't trust myself to just casually fix this," she said. "I've been trying all week, and I keep slipping into it without even realizing it. And yesterday," she trailed off, shaking her head. "That wasn't just a slip. That was exactly what you've been trying to tell me." Max didn't interrupt. "I need to feel what it's like without it," she continued. "Not an hour. Not during dinner. The whole day." Max watched her carefully. "And you think that's going to help?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know what I've been doing isn't enough yet." There was no defensiveness in her voice now. No minimizing. No negotiating. Just honesty. Max let that sit for a second before nodding slowly. "All right," he said. Sierra blinked. "That's it. That's it," he said. "If you're choosing it, I'm not going to talk you out of it." She studied him. "No warnings? No, this is going to be hard speech." "It is going to be hard," he said. "You already know that. You don't need me to repeat it." She exhaled, a small smile breaking through. "You're annoyingly supportive when you want to be." "I aim for balance," he said. She rolled her eyes lightly, then pushed herself off the bed. "Okay," she said. "I'm doing it before I can change my mind." Max watched as she walked out of the bedroom with a kind of determination that made it clear this wasn't performative. This was deliberate. A minute later, she came back in, holding her phone in both hands. "Witness," she said. Max raised an eyebrow. "I'm being recruited now?" "Yes." "All right," he said, sitting up straighter. Sierra looked down at the screen one last time, not checking anything, just acknowledging it, then held the power button. The screen went dark. She set the phone down on the dresser and stepped back like it might somehow turn itself back on. "Okay," she said. Max nodded once. "Okay." Silence followed. Not awkward. Not empty. Just unfamiliar. Sierra crossed her arms, shifting slightly. "Now what?" Max smirked. "Now you figure out what you actually like to do." She pointed at him. "That's not helpful." "It's accurate." She sighed, then glanced around the room like she expected something to jump out at her. "This feels weird already," she admitted. "It's been 30 seconds. "Exactly." Max laughed. The first hour passed slowly. Sierra paced more than she normally would. She picked things up, put them down, walked into rooms without remembering why, then walked back out again. She opened the fridge twice without taking anything, then stood there staring at the contents like they might offer guidance. Max didn't hover. He moved through his own routine, giving her space but staying present. Every now and then, he'd glance over, checking not to monitor but to understand where she was in the process. "You okay?" he asked at one point as she stood in the living room, arms folded tightly. "I don't like this," she said. "Good." She shot him a look. "How is that good?" "Because it means you're actually feeling the gap," he said. "You can't fix something if you don't feel it first." She frowned at him but didn't argue. Instead, she dropped onto the couch with a huff. "Talk to me," she said. Max sat down beside her. "About what?" "I don't care. Just something." He studied her for a second, then leaned back. "When I was younger," he said, "I used to think silence meant something was wrong." Sierra turned her head. "Really?" "Yeah. If nothing was happening, I assumed something should be happening." She nodded slowly. "That sounds familiar." "It took me a while to realize silence is where everything actually settles," he continued. "That's where you figure out what matters." She leaned back too, staring at the ceiling. "I don't think I've had real silence in a long time," she said. Max didn't respond right away. He just let that statement exist. By midday, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It just eased. Sierra wasn't pacing anymore. She wasn't glancing toward the dresser every 5 minutes. The restless energy that had been sitting under her skin started to settle into something quieter, more manageable. They went out for a walk. No headphones. No distractions. No checking anything. Just movement. Sierra noticed things she normally wouldn't. Small details like how loud the wind sounded when there was nothing filtering it, or how people actually looked at each other when they talked without something in their hands. "This is Different, she said as they walked. Good different or strange different? Both, she said. But not bad. Max nodded. That's usually where the useful changes are. She glanced at him. You really don't struggle with this, do you? With what? Not needing it, she said. Max shrugged. I use my phone. I just don't let it use me. She was quiet for a second, absorbing that. I think it's been using me, she admitted. Yeah, he said simply. No judgment, just agreement. That evening felt different in a way that surprised both of them. Dinner wasn't a rule this time. There was no phone-free hour to observe. There was just nothing pulling them away. Conversation flowed without interruption. Jokes landed in real time. Silence didn't feel like something that needed filling. At one point, Sierra laughed so hard she had to lean forward, catching her breath. What? Max asked, amused. I almost reached for my phone to check something, she said between laughs, and then realized it wasn't even there. And I didn't need it, she said. Max smiled faintly. That right there was the difference. Not resistance. Not effort. Choice. Later that night, Sierra stood in front of the dresser, looking down at her phone. It was still off. She hadn't touched it all day. Max leaned against the doorframe, watching her. So? He asked. She picked it up, turning it over in her hand. I don't feel rushed to turn it back on, she said. That's a good sign. She nodded slowly. Yeah. She looked up at him, her expression clearer than it had been all week. I didn't realize how much I was missing, she said. Max crossed his arms loosely. What did you miss? She smiled, small but certain. You, she said. The answer was simple, but it carried everything behind it. Max held her gaze for a moment, then nodded once. Good, he said. Sierra looked back down at the phone, then back at him. I think I know what balance looks like now, she said. Max pushed off the doorway slightly. Yeah. She set the phone back down without turning it on. It looks like this, she said. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just clarity. And for the first time since the problem had surfaced, Max didn't feel like he was waiting to see if things would hold. He already knew they would. Chapter 8. Full signal. Max didn't rush anything after Saturday. That was the difference. In the past, anytime something uncertain had turned into something promising, he would have naturally leaned into it, tested it a little, moved it forward just to confirm it wasn't temporary. Not out of insecurity, but out of habit. He liked knowing where things were headed. But this time he didn't need to push, because Sierra wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. There was a quiet confidence in that distinction that Max recognized immediately. It wasn't about momentum, it was about direction. And direction, once it was set, didn't need constant checking. Sunday morning felt lighter. Not in some dramatic, life-changing way, but in the small, noticeable absence of tension. There was no lingering pressure to get it right. No careful monitoring of behavior. Sierra walked into the kitchen with her phone already in her hand. She paused, then set it down on the counter without unlocking it. Max noticed but didn't react outwardly. He was leaning against the sink, drinking his coffee, watching her with that same calm awareness he always had. That was intentional, he said. Sierra glanced at him. Everything's intentional right now. Good. She leaned against the counter across from him. It's weird. I don't feel like I have to fight it anymore. That's because you're not treating it like something you can't control, Max said. You reset your relationship with it. She nodded slowly. I think I did. Max studied her for a moment, then pushed off the sink, setting his mug down. So what does it look like going forward? He asked. Sierra didn't answer immediately, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to say it right. Balance, she said finally. Not as a rule, as a habit. Max gave a small nod. That's the only version that lasts. She smiled faintly. Look at us, being healthy adults. Speak for yourself, he said. I'm still hilarious. You're tolerable, she corrected. High praise. She stepped closer, nudging his shoulder lightly. For a second, they just stood there, no distractions, no background pull, just easy, uncomplicated presence. That part didn't feel new. It felt like something they'd had before, and then temporarily misplaced. Later that afternoon, Max found himself at the kitchen table again, the same spot where he'd sat the week before, running through his checklist. Except this time, he didn't have to think hard about it. Respect, unchanged. Loyalty, unquestioned. Consistency, back where it belonged. But more than that, something deeper had settled into place. Awareness, not his, hers. And that made everything else easier. Max leaned back in his chair, exhaling quietly. Sierra walked in a moment later, drying her hands on a towel. What are you plotting? She asked, eyeing him. I don't plot, he said. You absolutely plot. I think, he corrected. That's worse. Max smirked faintly. Come here. She narrowed her eyes slightly, but stepped closer anyway. That sounded suspiciously serious. It's not serious, he said. Just something I've been thinking about. Sierra leaned a hip against the table, watching him carefully now. All right, Max rested his forearms on the table, looking at her directly. I talked to your dad last week, he said. That, she said slowly, sounds like it could go in a serious direction. It doesn't have to. What about? Max didn't circle it. Future. She didn't look surprised, but she did go very still. What about it? She asked. I told him I see one with you, Max said. I told him we've been talking about moving forward. Her gaze softened slightly. We have. Yeah, he agreed. We have. But, she prompted. Max hesitated, not because he was unsure, but because he understood the weight behind what he was about to say. I also told him there was something holding me back. Sierra's expression shifted. Not defensive, not upset, just attentive. The phone, she said. Max nodded once. The absence, he corrected gently. She absorbed that, then nodded slowly. That's fair. Silence settled between them for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. And now? She asked. Max studied her carefully. He wasn't looking for perfection. He wasn't looking for proof. He was looking for something simpler than that. Consistency with intention. And she had it. You fixed it, he said. Sierra blinked slightly. I'm fixing it. Same difference if it sticks. She crossed her arms loosely. And you think it will? Max didn't hesitate. Yeah. She let out a soft breath, something like relief passing through her expression before settling into something stronger. Certainty. So what does that mean? She asked. Max leaned back slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting into a subtle smile. It means I'm not waiting anymore. Her heart skipped, not in panic, not in uncertainty. In recognition. You were waiting, she said. Not passively, he replied. Just making sure. And now you're sure. Yeah. Sierra looked down for a second, then back at him. Good. It was such a simple response that Max almost laughed. But he didn't, because he understood it. There was no need for dramatics, no need for grand speeches, just clarity. That evening they went out for a walk again. No plan, no destination, just movement. Sierra had her phone in her pocket this time. Not in her hand. Not absent entirely. Just appropriately placed. Halfway down the block, she bumped her shoulder lightly into his. You know, she said, if you had tried to force this, I probably would have pushed back. I know, Max said. You didn't. I don't force people to change, he replied. I give them the space to decide if they want to. And if I didn't? Max glanced at her, steady and honest. Then I would have made a different decision. She nodded slowly. That's fair. They walked a few more steps in comfortable silence. Then she glanced at him again. You really wouldn't have wasted time, she said. No, he said simply. Sierra smiled faintly. I love that about you. Max huffed a quiet laugh. You're in the minority. I doubt that. You shouldn't, he said. Most people like things complicated. And you don't. No, he said. I like things real. She slipped her hand into his, easy and natural. This feels real, she said. Max gave her hand a small squeeze. Yeah, he agreed. Full signal. No interference. No missing pieces. Just exactly what it was supposed to be.